Hey everybody, welcome back. So, something I get asked pretty often because I'm now selling fig trees, cuttings that I've rooted, is how do you choose a variety that's good for your location, and what is the difference between a Breba crop and a main crop? So, let's get into that. Alright, looks like it's time for fig main crop. How can I tell these are main crop? Check it out. See this little bud right here? This little, looks like a little pyramid, triangle. That is this year's fruit. So, figs can have up to two types of fruit. This is last year's growth, and that will give you what's called breba, which they will push out some buds in the fall and then overwinter them. And then they have what's called main crop, which grows on the green growth that comes out this year. And this would be another example of that right there. And you'll see them right in between the nodes, right in between the branches, just like that. Pretty neat. So there's a good chance, depending on what time of the year they come out, that they'll ripen. And figs need a certain amount of heat to ripen their fruit. So I'm not sure exactly what is causing them to put out so many main crop this year. At least this one. This one is Alma. But maybe since I moved it into a sunnier, hotter location, that's what caused it to put out these main crop buds. So we'll see what happens and if they ripen. I have some notes I think about around what they've done in previous years. And all of these ones, this one, that one, LSU Purple, Cadota, they've all been kind of experimental because they seem to like sometimes ripen their fruit and sometimes not, depending on how hot it stays in the fall, whether or not they got enough water, etc., etc. So let me show you an example of a Breba crop. This is a Breba. You can see it's on the dark gray last year's wood, and it overwintered, so it didn't get cold enough to kill it, and it usually doesn't here in Portland. We're right outside of Portland, but close enough. And they will usually overwinter without any kind of protection. But I can also see that we've got potentially main crop developing here as well. There's maybe a slightly better example down there. So, looking good. I'll make some notes about this to show that they're pushing out main crop, and maybe this is a hot enough location that it'll actually work out. So here I am at the nursery that's local to me, One Green World, and I'm going to click on the figs here. Now, my location, which is right outside of Portland, is an interesting location for growing figs. And the reason I say that is because, well, it's a cool Mediterranean climate. So that in itself is a bit challenging. It doesn't get super cold over the winter, but it also doesn't get very hot over the summer. So we're left with this kind of quandary of figs like to grow in a warm Mediterranean climate. And I'll show you what that means. It's the Köppen climate classification. Okay, so in the Köppen climate classification, there's 3 letters here, and you can see some of them listed here, and all the designations here on the map. What they do is they break it down into are you tropical, dry, temperate, continental, or polar? So I'm temperate. And then the second letter is, do you have a dry winter, no dry season, or a dry summer? So I definitely have a dry summer, so I'm CS. And then they ask if I have a hot, warm, or cold summer. And I would say I'm somewhere in the middle, so I'm a CSB. So I could click on here, CSB, warm summer Mediterranean. And then I can get some information on that, like they're saying here, Pacific Northwest, and then some other areas that are like that, which is Victoria, Canada. Wow. Cape Town, South Africa, and then places in Portugal. So I can use this information to kind of look for other plants that are native to, say, Cape Town, South Africa, and then try to possibly locate some seeds or some cuttings or something that will, and then try them out where I'm at. Anyway, back to figs. How do you pick varieties? So one, you have to know your climate. You have to know how hot it gets on average, what kind of heat units you get, and that's also a calculation you can do. Summer heat units. And I believe there's calculators online to figure this out, but I will try and find one of those a little bit later. But I mean, if you've lived in your climate for a while, you know, like, do the summers get scorching hot? Do you have high humidity or low humidity? Do your winters get below freezing for a significant amount of time? And you can look that up with the internet browser really easily. So hardiness zone, it's called. And then you can look for your area. So let's say Portland, Oregon. Boop, and you can click on it. And you can see that it brings up the Oregon zone map. And then you can zoom in here and see that where I'm at, it's about 8B. So now you know your minimum, now you know your average winter minimum. So for me, that's going to be about 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Often it gets colder than that. Sometimes it gets warmer than that. It's, you know, it's an average. So figs, I think on average, if you're below, I would say like 7B here, like it's getting below 5 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit, you may have to cover your figs in the winter. So that's an important piece of information, right? If you need to cover your figs in the winter, figs have two types of crops that they can potentially put out. They can put out what's called a breba crop, and they can put out a main crop. Now the breba crop overwinters, assuming it doesn't get too cold. So if you're in, say, zone 7A and it gets down to like -5 or something, or 0, there's a good chance that without wrapping the fig, the top branches of it are going to die. Now, that's important because if you want to have earlier fruiting and you're trying to overwinter breba crops, they might not work. So you might say, okay, my summers get super hot, but my winters also get very cold. I'm going to shoot for main crop. Now, there are a bunch of varieties that are good for main crop. And I'm just kind of going through the varieties here, but let's say you pick LSU Purple. And you can do some research on your own to figure out which ones will work out, but you know, you should try to find out when exactly is the ripening time, and this could be, and they don't specify here, is this breba or main crop, but let's say the main crop ripens in August. If you have enough heat in the summer, but it's also too cold in the winter, you might shoot for main crop varieties, and that might be a good variety for you. Like another one that's a good main crop variety is Smith. I don't know if they have it here. Let's see. Smith. Oh, they don't. Okay, well, One Green World is located in Portland, so they're kind of like generally looking for varieties that are going to work out here. But here's one that works out usually for main crop. Ronde de Bordeaux. It's from France. It's got an early main crop, and this one says it ripens sometime around late July, early August. So for here, that's perfect. It's generally a dry time of the year. Figs tend to split when they get rained on. So if you've got a dry period of the year that you know is going to be consistently dry, you could try and shoot for figs that are going to ripen at that point. So you have a couple different variables here. Your overwinter cold, your summer heat, and depending on when you want your figs to ripen, July, August, maybe even September, if you've got like a late heat season that happens, you could pick either Breba or main crop, or there's even some that will do both. And those are called common. And the common types, they will try to ripen a Breba crop, and then they will try to ripen a main crop as well. Now, if your season is long enough, like say you're in California, that could work out for you. So something else to think about. Trying to think of one that's a decent, has two crops. I believe Negron does. Now they don't say. They do say it's synonymous with Violet de Bordeaux, which I do have in ground, and I'm pretty happy with. I think it overwinters a small amount of Breba, but it puts out. Actually, that's not. I think it. No. Yeah. Now that I think about it, it overwinters quite a few Breba, but it also makes an attempt at main crop as well. So something to narrow down. Another thing that could be interesting is there's a spreadsheet. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, Ross put this out years ago. And he's got figs by flavor. Oh, he's changed it a little bit. Okay. He says go to my website now. Yeah, he's got figs that are by flavor. And you can pick a flavor that you like, and then look for varieties that are like that. So, for instance, I know personally that I like complex berry. I like, I generally like berry. The honey ones are okay. The sugar ones are okay. The cherry ones I've never tried yet, but I generally go for berry. I don't know if you can't click on these, it looks like. But he used to have in the spreadsheet, you could say, you could like look at here and know that, oh, he's changed this around quite a bit. Okay, I'm thinking that he's no longer using this spreadsheet. Yeah. So what I'm getting at here is that you can like read these descriptions here and then figure out which type of flavor that you like. Is it melon? Is it cherry? Is it complex berry? Is it sugar honey? Is it fruity honey? There's a lot of different flavors here. And from what I've learned is they've got like the color of the flesh here determines a little bit of the flavor, actually quite a bit, I think, and the color of the skin. So like this one on the right, the complex berry, it's got that dark red interior, it's got that jammy look to it, and it's got a purple skin. That has a raspberry, blackberry kind of taste to it. I like those. But there's other ones that are kind of like, let's say, more of a brown color. Like this one on the left, the sugar one. And that's going to have more of a figgy flavor to it. So figs can kind of vary between like more figgy that you're used to, like honey fig Newtons, stuff like that. And then more on the like the fruity kind of raspberry, strawberry fig combination, which I tend to like more. I also like the jammy ones better than the like more watery ones. But that's just my personal preference. So clicking on a few varieties that you like, see if you can find, like narrow down the taste that you like. See if you can find some figs that are in that category, and then figure out if they're Breba or main crop or both, and then figure out, oh, this is a lot of stuff, and then finally figure out if that will work in your climate. So it's this process of kind of, there's a large universe of figs to start with, and then you you narrow it down based on the characteristics of your area. So that's kind of the long-winded story here. I started out with One Green World's recommendation. I just went there and said, what's the best fig for the Pacific Northwest? And they said, oh, hands down, Desert King. I said, okay, great. So I put Desert King in the ground, and yeah, it's a great fig. I love it. It's got this green exterior, which is super thin. It's not very, it's got a very thin skin. And then the interior of it is red, which I like because it has more of a berry, jammy flavor to it. Okay, yeah, strawberry colored fruit flesh. So, why am I looking for more varieties, right? Why not just stick with this one? Well, this one was great, but it's a San Pedro type. And that means that it overwinters a Breba crop, and it also tries to put out a main crop, but the main crop needs to be pollinated. And there's a tiny wasp that goes into the little eye down here at the bottom of the fig and will pollinate the figs. Unfortunately, that wasp is not native to Portland, so it's native to California. So the San Pedro, or the Breba that overwinters, works out fine because it doesn't need to be pollinated. The main crop for Desert King usually fails, and it might ripen like one or two, but like the majority of them just don't work. The plant just gives up on them, which, I mean, I don't blame the plant. They're trying to further their genetic potential there, and fruit that isn't pollinated kind of is a waste of their time. But so I started with that, and the other, I guess, so the challenge that falls out of that is that you can't prune it. Well, I mean, you can prune it, but every time you cut off a branch, you're cutting off next year's fruit. So now I've seen all these like different pruning methods online of like, what do I do with Desert King? And a lot of people are asking, everybody has different ideas. Do I keep it as a bush? And they're like all these elaborate methods to prune it. Okay, great. Now, that is challenging. So that sent me on the mission of, can I find things that are like Desert King, but are common? And what that means is when it's common, it will ripen both a Breba crop and a main crop without pollination. So there's a bunch of possibilities here. There's like Breba without pollination and main crop pollination, both pollinated, and then neither pollinated. So common are neither pollinated. So I started looking for ones that were like that. And I ended up with Violet de Bordeaux. I don't know if they have that here. I also ended up with Ronde de Bordeaux. And you can see that the flesh color is similar to what I'm talking about. They're smaller for sure. But they have the flesh color I'm going after. They're a common fig. They'll ripen a main crop pretty early. So if it turns out to be reliable here, this might be a better selection for me than Desert King. Unfortunately, it seems like the fruit size is pretty small. So Desert King like easily outweighs it in terms of total fruit production. I only have 2 Desert King trees, and they're massive at this point, and they'll put out like 50 pounds, not each, but together, and that's quite a lot. The Ronde de Bordeaux is more like maybe a pound or 2, but it's still small. And then I don't know. Yeah, they're listing Negron as the one that's kind of like VDB. Same thing. It's a common variety. It overwinters. It's got that dark red fruit flesh. It's got that taste that I'm after. It's jammy. And then since it's common, I can prune it however I want. I can cut off branches. I can keep it in any shape I want, and it'll still ripen a bunch of fruit. So that is the super long explanation of how I search for figs, what it means, the difference between main crop and Breba crop, and maybe how to narrow down things for your area. So if you're still hanging out, thanks for listening, and I hope you've learned something, and see you next time.